Well, good afternoon, and I want to welcome you to today's presentation of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. You know, you can travel around the United States like a lot of people are, but every single Friday at 12:15, what we want to bring you is business tips that are really going to take you to the next level. And today we got another special guest that comes on that is one of the recognized experts in the field of of systems and in manuals and in training your people. And we're going to bring him on after the music minute. But Randy, what would you add about today's special guest?
I'm very excited for this. I've listened to a lot of Al's podcasts. I have one interesting question that I'll save for the audience that I'm going to ask him that I learned about him years ago that I want to ask about. But I mean, he's phenomenal and his podcast is phenomenal and his books. So I think they're in for a real treat.
That's it. So Cheryl, what about you? What would you tell our audience today about this special guest we got coming on that we just had a really good 10-minute conversation with on camera here?
I think if people will listen to this and take heed of what's going on, especially if you're in the trades business, I think it's going to give you a whole new step up. And so I invite everyone to stay tuned and maybe even listen to the recording again.
Right. So our guest today is a gentleman by the name of Al Levy. And I first met Al 10 years ago. He was a speaker at the National Chimney Sweep Guild convention. He was the keynote there. And afterwards, I went up to him. I said, you know, I've just started coaching, but the words you have spoken here have remained an inspiration to me to this day. And I've actually quoted Al quite a few times as I work with clients. So stick around with us. We're going to be right back in just a minute. We'll have Al right here on the microphone with us. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Levy, and I'm going to switch you and Brandy over, and you're in the big screen and put Brandy in the small one there, okay? So how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. Welcome to World Headquarters for 7 Power Contractor located out here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And as I was sharing before, I think I don't have much of my New York accent anymore. So if I speak too fast, I'm sorry. And if my accent gets thrown off, I apologize, but that's just me. And I'm really excited to share some of the stuff with you. I really hope I can live up to the hype, but I can. I promise you.
Hey, dude, you know, one of the things is we had Tommy Mello on last week as our guest, and Tommy Mello said you have been the most influential person that had ever, you know, changed his way of thinking and the way he does business. And if you can change Tommy Mello and you can guide him, then Al, that means a whole lot. So let's start out. Where did Al come from? Let's tell our listeners a little bit about your background, because today you're living out there in sunny Arizona, but you haven't always lived there in Arizona, I don't believe, have you?
No, if you know where JFK Airport is in New York City, Long Island, which is named aptly, it's 115 miles tip to tip, and New York traffic. We actually ran a main hub and 3 spokes because the drive time was just a killer to be able to service our area. And our company was started in 1936 out of my grandfather's gas station. My dad and my uncle started the company. We went into the fuel oil business. And for those who live in the Northeast, that's how they used to heat houses out there. That was our primary business. My brothers and I came along. I was the youngest of 3 brothers in the business. And so we were 3rd generation. And I pushed us into plumbing, gas heating, air conditioning, electrical, because I could see that things were beginning to become a case of if we didn't own the basement, somebody else was going to come in, and I was not going to have that. And so we went into those businesses as well. Our business got to the point where, you know, I had systematized it so well that I happily put myself out of a job. So that's a good thing. It was really great. You know, I finally, you know, one of the catalysts, and there's so many different catalysts, but one of them was I was sharing the other day is back in the, you know, people think, oh, I can't find great text. I can't find great text. I bet the 3 of you have never heard that.
Never. Yeah, right.
Never. It's the first time. So you can write it down for all of you who are listening. Couldn't find great text. Well, I heard this in 1990, 30 years ago. And at the time I was like 30, and the guy on the stage was talking about that the average age of the tech was 50. And when you're 30, the idea that there's 50-year-old techs out there is horrifying. Mm-hmm. And so I thought to myself, we got to fix this problem. And that was really the commitment, we were always looking for what I call lightning in a bottle. And what that means is there's one magical person who's going to walk in the door. They're going to be willing, kind, friendly, neat, clean. They're going to be technically expert, so I don't have to do anything. That's what I call lightning in a bottle. And you may be lucky. You may find lightning in a bottle. We did for a while. But if you're really going and growing your company, it's very difficult. You don't get the employee you want. You get the whole employee. And like you were mentioned before with the DISC survey, that's a good thing, John, you could speak to about how complex this stuff is. So we committed to training our own from scratch, taking young, willing people way back then and created a career path for them and levels for them so that they could come on and continue with us. Because there's really 5 steps that I like to talk about in staffing power. So in staffing power, it's always be recruiting, always be hiring, always be orienting, always be training, and always be retaining. And we're miserable at it. And here's Jerry, that you'll appreciate. This was our approach is sometimes we were lucky we got a 2-week notice, 2 weeks that they're leaving. Sometimes it was 1 week. And sometimes they just left the keys on their dashboard and we go, are they gone? And so, that was really and then of course, we hired out of desperation, which is exactly the backwards way of doing stuff where you're not proactive. Actually, my brother Marty, who was the inside financial guy, can't fix anything. He had a name for it. And the name for it was the mirror test. And sometimes it's lost to my accent. MIRROR. Breathe in the mirror, you're hired, because we were so desperate. We never thought about that. So this was about, and it was funny because we were very good marketers. Recruiting needs to be visioned as always. It's the same thing of marketing. You're always out looking for the talent. And I would defy any of the listeners out there today. If 2 really good people walked in tomorrow, you mean to tell me there aren't 2 knuckleheads on your staff that you're dying to get rid of? Because I was always trying to get rid of them. But I recognize I'll have to drive my truck myself all day long. And so that's what kind of, stops us. The other thing I will share, Jerry, is I have been known now as the systems guy, operating manuals, training centers, training curriculum, and I've done it all over the country and Canada. And through now, because of it being the program online, it's actually in Australia and New Zealand. I have contractors doing this. I was not that guy. I was great at sales and marketing, and my team was great at blowing it up. And so I had to stop and go back and fix it.
Got you covered. Well, one of the things I remember from that 2011 presentation you did that stuck with me, and I've repeated this to many people, was that you had a quote which was, train your people in your training center, not in your home. And it was actually a marketing thing. So Al, I just want you to know you've been very important to me, since that time and following what you do. But this is what I know. You've just struck the heartstrings of those 2 ladies on here. And I also know that both of them have got some really good questions prepared. In fact, I would say Brandy's got a desk full of them there that we'll never get through all of them today. Okay. So Cheryl, it's your turn to go first today. Brandy was last time, so it's your turn to go first. Turn your mic on, Cheryl.
My first one's going to go a little off as different from a question. Could you give us a little synopsis of your book that you have out, The 7-Power Contractor, and the importance of why people should look at it? Yes.
First of all, you'll notice it's really thin. You see it? I always believed in business books, anything longer than 150 pages, I kind of questioned how focused was the author. So when I worked with my editor, I said to her, I've got 15 years of writing. She goes, well, what do you need from me? I go, I have 150 children in my audience going, pick me. and it's just going to look like a ransom note. I need you to be able to deliver it. She goes, well, what's the overriding theory? And I said, here's the overriding theory. When I was sitting in your chair, I'm talking about all you guys as owners, it's, first of all, it's really uncomfortable on a lot of days, this chair, if you were like me. The second thing was, I thought there had to be 7 million things that I had to get right to make this company, because I was not a stupid guy. How come this is not working right? How come this is not automatic? How come I don't have a life? Even though I was making a lot of money, it was a very stressful process. And that's why my tagline has always been less stress, more success. Now, I didn't pick that by accident, because that's really what I wanted. And also, as I've always shared, is I also had a very good goal by the time I was 30, which is I didn't really want to be a really rich guy and also a really dead guy. It's not a good combination. And so that was really my focus for writing the book, was to share that there are these 7 concepts, which is planning power, operating power, staffing power, sales coaching, marketing, and finance. 7 things. Now, you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to master those things. Here's the great news that I can share with you. I've worked with some of the best, and he mentioned Tommy Mello was one of the best. I've worked with a lot of the best shops out there. Many of the Nexstar shops came to call me as the graduate class to the Nexstar program, and because it was more customized to what they were doing. The situation is that there's nobody I've worked with, these great companies, where they're 10 in every one of the 7 things I just blasted out there, but they are not a 0 in any one of them. And that's the challenge. And so again, planning, operations, staffing, sales coaching, marketing, finance, those are the 7 things. I did share the other day, Jerry, was why I'm laughing. You know, Anthony Robbins had a great program for 30 days, change your life. Hopefully everybody knows who Anthony Robbins is, but 30 days, change your life for the rest of your life. And what he discovered is people didn't want to invest 30 days of their life to change their whole life for the rest of the time. So he had to boil it down to 7 days to change the rest of your life. Well, here's this thing I'm going to do for all of you who are listening. Yes, there are 7 things that I talked about, but really there are 2 things, if you really want to boil it down: more calls, more texts. More calls, more texts. You will always be chasing those 2. But let me define what I mean by that. More calls means the right amount of calls from the right customer at the right time. More calls. And more texts is text that can communicate really well. And if they're a service tech, that leads to good sales. They're neat and clean operationally, keep the truck clean, keep the job clean. And then last of all, they're technically proficient so that they can actually do the job. And those are the 2 things. And what Jerry had mentioned before, which is, let's face it, if you're not doing training in-house, like I did with the great Bob Ferrari, who was in chimney and venting in Northern California, what we talked about is really what you're doing is you're coming to my house today to learn your job. And that's not right. They should be fully trained and signed off in your own hands-on training center. And what we learned was originally when we remember that 1990 speech I was talking about that opened our eyes? Well, of course, we went out and built a training center. And then sure enough, my brother Richie, really a great tech. He's probably still the best tech out there at my company. But he would call me up and go 2 years later, he goes, didn't you show them how to do motor rotation? And did you check, about the current fit? And I go, I did, but they've been out there for 2 years. It's disconnected. We actually had to back up and write the operating manuals for all the things that we do. So they had a touchstone, if you will, to the process of how we did our work. And when we got done, here's the horrible thing that happened, is we looked at the hands-on training center and we said, oh my Lord, we built it all wrong. Because the manuals, table of contents in the trade manual in particular, tells you what tasks they need to demonstrate and learn in the training center so that they can be released to go out and work in the field. Make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And 2 things. Number one, I'm a believer in thin books too. That's my book that I wrote on standardizing standard operating procedures.
Very nice.
I firmly believe that you should be able to read a book and digest it in a 2-hour plane flight. That's kind of my philosophy of books. They used to tell me it's got to have 25,000 words. No, it's got to have value. It's got to be able to be understood and be followed very carefully is what it's all about. But also, whenever I went into the coaching industry, I'll tell you something. One of the people I called was Bob Ferrari. And you, Bob, and it's like, Bob, you have hired Ellen Rohr and Al Levy to work with you. Tell me why. And one of the things that you taught that Bob learned from you was that Bob had to become a trainer. Okay, this is one of the things that you embedded into him, and he had built his in-house training center. In fact, I sent another client all the way to California just to take a look at what Bob had done there. In fact, I've got that videotape still in my files because he took it with a GoPro walking around there and brought me back all the videos. So anyway, it's just the things that you're on. You're dead on the money there, brother. So Brandy, it's your turn. What's at the top of your questions there today?
Well, my first question is actually really selfish because it's something that's happening in my business that I wondered if Al could help me out with.
Yeah.
So we recently hired another office person and another tech, and both of them on their second day sent us a message saying that they didn't think this industry was for them. The technician had actually done a shadow day with the owner of our company. I don't know how. So we asked both of them, what could we have done better? Or can you tell me a little bit more? We never heard back from the office person. The technician said that he just really thinks that he wanted to go back to plumbing, which is what he was doing before. But I don't know how to vet that or how to feel that out or how to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Because I always want to look at us and say, what did we do wrong here?
Well, first of all, congratulations for not pointing fingers at them, because like the Confucius thing is when you point a finger, 4 is still pointing at you. So that was, I love to blame them. just so you know, until I realized that didn't fix anything. So congratulations for that. Here's what when I changed and again got it proactive about always recruiting, hiring, orienting, training, and retaining. One of the first things that I did is I showed them the box org chart, which by the way, I've used with everyone, including Bob Ferrari. It hasn't changed. It fits every contractor. Now, there may be pieces of it you won't use. So if you don't have a service department, as an example, you might take that wing out. But it's the boxes that it takes to run your company. And depending on the size of your company, your box is going to be a lot of places. So when I would do that, Brady, I would bring them in and I would say, look, there's enormous opportunity. Here's the org chart. Here's where you're starting. Here's how I'm going to give you a career, not a job. And I'm going to work you hard and you're going to do a dirty job, but you have to stay clean. And we're going to show you how to do all of that. And if you're willing to do that, there's a career. Now, I want to tell you, I'm going to take you outside. I'm going to show you the whole place. At the end of this, you're going to have the ability to talk to somebody who was just like you a couple of years ago. I will not be there. He will not tell me what he has to say with you. He's only here to find out if he can answer any of the questions you wanted. So we did a lot more of the stuff on the front end that we had not done before, setting up the idea about we provide a career, not a job. That was one of the things we always stressed. And we partnered them up with what we call a big brother, big sister, depending on where they were fitting in. So it was actually a client of mine early on in my career. I'm very lucky. Early in my career said to me, he goes, orientation is very difficult and very important. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, recruiting, hiring, like you talk about, but orienting is a big step. And I go, yeah, but what are you getting to? He goes, do you remember the first day you went to high school and how much you felt like a small fish in a very large pond? Would it have been nice to have a big brother, big sister? I go, yeah. He goes, here's what I can tell you. The success of everyone that's here is really determined by the first 2 weeks. I go, that's pretty, outlandish. He goes, no, it isn't. He says that's where they're either getting fully on board with your culture or they're always going to be adrift. And so they spent a structured couple of days. And we actually wrote out day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, where every day we would be debriefing with them, making sure that, Ellen Rohr, who you guys know of, but Ellen Rohr was a great consulting partner of mine. And we also actually had a Zoom Train franchise together. She was talking about a great way to perceive this is the light bulb is either getting brighter or dimmer. And the same thing is about measuring. I will also share a technique, Brandon, was a little bit, I learned, unfortunately, too late in my own career. But I have been able to apply it in the consulting, which was, it's too late when they knock on your door at 5 o'clock, because you know why they're there. And you're going to either have to play, let's make a deal to keep them on board. It's too late, or they're going to go back to wherever they are. So what I learned to do with pretty much every one of my staff is I would, in the hallway or wherever I meet with them, I go, Brandy, what's going right? What's going wrong? What do I need to know right now? And their ability to meet me and look at my eyes and their enthusiasm told me whether they were in or out. It was my chance to save them. And in some cases, it was my opportunity to say goodbye in a good way.
Gotcha. So, Brandy, you know, you have just learned a trick from Tommy Mello. You understand this because Tommy Mello shared with me why he does podcasts, because he gets great people like you on. And Brandy just got a great answer to an issue she has. So, Brandy, is this giving you ideas of new processes, not only for Flues Brothers, but for our clients from what you just heard? Because I just heard a great one there.
Absolutely. I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Because like I said, this is the way we've often phrased bringing in a new person. And so you'll know Brandy's one of the best in the business of onboarding. She is really good at this, but I think she has learned some. But I compare it to kindergarten. When somebody comes into kindergarten and now they've left the confines of parenthood, and now the responsibility of that kindergarten teacher is to ingrain this person into the group setting and the group learning they're now going into. But if you listen to that, I think Al just shared a significant gold nugget, Brandy, that we need to be using and recommending.
I agree.
Cheryl, what about you? What's your next one on your top list there?
Well, I'm going to take it to a side that I never thought about. Okay. As you know, I do the hiring here. And one of the things that I read about you was that you sang in every interview and made your client sing. So,
yeah, you know, that's funny that you mentioned that. And I hope nobody turned off the podcast at this point, because you're going to want to stick around for this. I'd love to say it was my idea. It was not. I was in a seminar and the guy was up on the stage and talking about, how do you know if somebody's willing in an interview? And he talks about, you have to make them sing. And I turned to another fellow Long Islander and I go, is that the stupidest thing you ever heard? He looks over at me and he goes, yeah, that's what I thought about 6 months ago. But after all the people that I hired, I would never hire another person who doesn't sing. And I was so impressed by that I began to learn the technique. And later on, I actually bought that as part of my staffing power from that person because it was so powerful. It is a technique that you need to understand. So it's not like the first thing you do. So you're going down the clipboard or whatever you're using, even if your tablet, you're asking questions, you're doing your stuff, you're doing the middle of the hiring thing. You put it down, you look at them and go, Cheryl, part of our hiring process is to ask you sing. And you know what? I recognize that's embarrassing. So I'm going to start you off and you're going to join in. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Now, two things have happened. I have shown you that I'm willing. And the second thing is I have a really awful voice. And so if I'm willing to sing, there's nothing you can do. People think they do this for techs, apprentices, the rest of it. Accounts receivable, accounts payable. The reason for this is that as a tech, I remember, I'm figuring out what my day is going to be tomorrow. And now I get to the shop and none of it's going to be the same. Just the way it is, right? My truck is broken down or the job got canceled. That's just the life of it. And so this is one of these, can you turn right and turn left and navigate with me in this hiring interview? And it's been really good. I do have another hiring tip if anybody's interested.
Please do.
Well, what I learned out pretty early is some people are really good in the morning and they fall apart at the end of the day. And some people are falling apart at the beginning of the day and they don't really get around till the end of the day. So I did 2 interviews. I don't think you need more than 2 interviews. And I'm a strong believer from the beginning that they respond, you need to be able to hire within 2 weeks or anybody good is gone. So the first interview was either in the morning and then the other one would be in the afternoon. Or if it was in the afternoon, the next one would be in the morning, because I just wanted to kind of see how are they put together, especially now because most of the younger people are, up all night. And so it's a big thing for me to have done that. The other thing is, after I finished the tour, magically I would end up by your car. And the reason I was at your car was I wanted to see if you had a sticker on the back that said, "All bosses are jerks," or something of that nature. But really, it was their car. I wasn't judging their car. Trust me. My first car would make anyone laugh because it had been through 190,000 miles, and every salesperson I worked for my dad had had it before. What I was looking for is it full of Wendy's wrappers all over the place? Because guess what? Your truck is going to look the same. So that was one of the good tips that I picked up along the way as well.
So Cheryl, my question to you, am I going to hear happy birthday ringing through the halls of our CBC office next week?
Well, let me elaborate to Al a little bit. I do the first call with the people I hire for, and I do it via Zoom.
Yep.
So would that be the one to have the song on, or when they're in front of their employer? And then I'll go with the rest of it.
Wait a minute. I think you're trying to pass this off to the client, just to be honest with you.
No, I'll probably, you know me well enough to know if there's a good tip out there, I'll definitely try it, and then my client can do it also.
Okay.
We usually do it and what I recommend it is to do it on the first one to find out if they're worthy of a second. Why waste our time on a second interview? And of course, we were always, like marketing. The goal of marketing, of course, is to get way more calls than you can humanly do in a day, right? Because then you get to set the price and you decide who you're going to. The second part of that, though, is the same thing applies to recruiting, which is there's more applicants than possibly you could hire, so that we can hold our standards of the recruiting hiring process. And we also hired heavy, because if we hired heavy, for us, we had this basic formula that really stayed true for many, many years, which was we had 5 install crews. We were looking for 5 apprentices that were always rotating through that. And so of the 5, they had to be there about 90 days before I would take them to what I call apprentice to junior tech training. As that's where, like what Jerry, you were describing, where they were in the classroom learning all the stuff. They have to earn their way. You own this box before you get this box. You own this box before you get this box. You own this box. And that's really the big thing here is there's nothing given. But I will provide all the training. I will provide all the stuff. And they actually had to sign off to volunteer for this, to go to that intensive training. And it's held up every place that I've been in where they sign off on the form. And the reason is because they would have to go to a trade school. They'd have to pay money out of their own pocket. And when they come out, there's no guarantee of a job, let alone a bump in pay. And so our salary levels or ladders were matched to the boxes. Your opportunity to make more, sell more, do more was tied to that as well. And that really was a big thing. So long way back is I would get, not the first thing you do, like I said, halfway down your hiring practice, just pretty much the way you do it. And I would recommend, which I've always recommended, is Cheryl, whoever does it, they need to practice with somebody, so that back and forth, so they get very comfortable with it, so that when you do it with somebody live, it feels more comfortable.
Well, the good thing, I've lived with Jerry long enough, I can be very comfortable doing about anything, if you understand. Maybe I'll call him in to sing.
Yeah,
I think so.
I'll do it. Hey, I'll do it with them.
I bet Jerry would sing. Funny that you mentioned that, Cheryl. My number one model customer was my wife. She was just like every one of my, you talk about, when you talk about marketing, who's your ideal customer? It was my wife. And so we would role play all day long at our house, about these things. And she was actually the one that told me one day, I said, how much money would you spend with a service tech who comes to do a service call? She goes, $2,500. I said, why did you say that? She goes, if I'm going to spend more than $2,500, I want somebody a little more dressed up. I want somebody to come here, engineer, and be a little bit more. I said, does it matter if they're from our company? She goes, no. I said, I'll tell you what, you go ask your friends and come back to me with an answer. And they all had the same answer. And by the way, it's been proven out, pretty much the closing rate and all the other things. That's why when you look at the org chart, you'll see the big tickets are sold by what I call a system advisor.
Right. So Cheryl, you got one of our clients has done stated on there, I'm not singing, okay? And I don't think he's too big to make him sing. But he brought an interesting question up, Al, because we actually have 2 listeners right now. One has spoken to you previously, and Josh Kelly just said the same thing. And so Josh Kelly is a guy that we're going to be interviewing on here for long. In fact, I asked him to be on next Friday, who has devised this immaculate digitalized system for his company. But the question is there, how do we get a fireplace and chimney trade manual? Al, you told us when we were talking a little bit earlier that you had some that still need to do some work on it, and I'm willing to help you out with this. But when can these guys get an Al Levi thing? And like I said, Josh just put up there, his website is called What Would Josh Do? That's his whole goal. Josh's goal is to have a team of people that never ask him a question. That would be his dream. Okay. So how do these guys get you to print this chimney and venting and fireplace manual?
That is what I call the trade manual. And I'm not devaluing the value of the trade manual, but it's not where most companies are broken. Most companies are broken in what I call the triangle of communication, which is the ability of the CSR to capture all the right information, to build the sales momentum, to make the customer know that when the great Jerry arrives, life will get good again. And then hand the information off to the dispatcher who works with the service manager to maximize billable hours, get all the information out to the tech. The tech has a manual that they need to know what they need to do from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed, other than the chimney and venting work, and then getting the information back. That's where companies broke. That was the first big thing that fixed Tommy's company way before we did anything with garage door manuals. Then I agree there's all the other things, but there's accounts receivable, accounts payable, apprentice manuals, install field supervisors, service field supervisors. There's about 30 something manuals out there. And yeah, I'm happy to work with somebody to help get us to the point where we can edit. It's just a tweak to the manual. I have to desensitize it a little bit, like I was sharing, Jerry. But that's what's going to be. I did show it to Lee on a Zoom call, so he got a feel for it. And in his particular case, like he said, if some of this was heating, and he doesn't do any of it. But I will share with you, it's way easier to be an editor than sit down and be a creator. I tried to write manuals for years and years and years. And when I did, they came out like a law book. Article 1-.635, and people's eyes would get crossed. And one time, the story I always share is that we had an employer handbook, which is, by the way, like 1/10 of the manuals you need. Now, it's a good CYA. And the way I describe that is they cover your anatomy as, it's important, but it doesn't help you run your business. The thing here is those other manuals really are key to how do you think of the box org chart as the bingo board. How do you cover the squares? And the first ones is that CSR dispatcher tech. Those are the most important. And then, yes, the trade manual is very helpful to have, edited down to something that you can do. Because like I said before, Jerry, that's what you want to have is the table of contents to figure out what do you want to put in your training center. Because the manuals are what you train them on. It tells you what to put in the training center. The hands-on training center is where they do the work. And the bridge is the training curriculum. But you said a really good thing that I popped back into my head, is that Bob Ferrari, who did not want to be a trainer, had to become a trainer. And so the story that comes up was I went to engineering school, came home, had my diploma. My dad said to me, "Congratulations, I'm proud of you. Here's your toolbox." And off I went. And, I worked I guess I was about 30. It came back in and I said to my dad, I go, being a tech is fine. Is that all there is? And my dad was not like me. He was very quiet. And he says, "I was wondering when you would ask." And I said, "What does that mean?" He goes, "I'll help you out. You are never getting out of that truck until you figure out how to put other people in that truck." And that was all he said. And I knew immediately that I needed to begin building these training and getting other people to be able to do it. Yep.
Well, like I said, sometime I'd love to connect you and Josh together. Randy, would you agree that if he saw what Josh has got in this What Would Josh Do website, it would truly amaze Al?
It's the most incredible thing that I've seen in our industry.
Where's Josh out of?
Josh is out of Waldorf, Maryland, which is right next to Washington, D.C. But
Okay.
like I said, Josh has figured out, like I said, I hate to pump his head up too much. I don't want to make you.
Is he not going to be able to fit in the screen if we do that?
Well, Josh has a hard time fitting in an airplane seat to start with. Josh is a big boy, okay? But anyway, like I said, He started putting this together some years ago, and it is everybody we show it to, it's beyond there. It just overwhelms them to do something like this. In fact, I sat there, Brandy and I were both in his office 2 weeks ago, I believe, Brandy, and I watched him onboarding people going through here. And the only thing I told him was, I'm afraid it may just overwhelm them with how much information you're putting out right away. But to be honest with you, I think it would be beneficial for you and Josh to connect together, and you could see how he has made use of Google to an unreal level. It's pretty unreal what he's done. So anyway, Brandy, I think Cheryl gave the last question. I think it's your turn. Am I right?
It is. I was going to tell Josh, though, I will set up a Zoom call with you later this afternoon, and we can practice singing together. He'll be looking for my invite.
You know what? I sang on this call, and it's going to be recorded, so I have no pride. Like I said, if I had a better way, I would say so. But look, the biggest thing I always say is, you are not my guinea pig. Yeah. There is 19 years of this. And I'm not talking about just chimney and venting, garage doors, kitchen cabinetry, roofing. You are not a guinea pig at anything that I share here.
Right. And I appreciate that. And you're going out, you're on 7 Facebook pages right now live and going on YouTube. So Al, your singing is recorded for posterity and it will be SEO'd, okay?
Yeah. Who does not want to hear the velvet tones of Al Levi singing?
That's it. So Brandy, what's your question?
Yeah, so I do have a question, but first I had another comment. I love what you said about from the CSR to the technician. One of the things that I'm always pushing for, and I teach in all my classes, is documentation. And one of the things I do for our clients is I listen to their CSR phone calls to see where they can improve. And sometimes the customer will give this gigantic wealth of information, and then I look at what they wrote to the tech, and it's cleaning of a wood-burning fireplace. So I love that you brought that up.
Sorry for laughing hard, but all of this is much funnier now, Randy. It was not funny when I was. It was not funny when I was sitting at my own company. But yeah, that's exactly right. And my CSR manual is maybe 30 pages long, and the reason it's 30 pages and not 300, there's no way I can learn all this stuff. It just overwhelms me. And a really tight 30 pages, and there is